So, dear friends, let's get technical, and I'm going to start, Eva, with you. Now, FT does not require a central access point for data exchange, if I'm correct, right? So what can be the central challenge to bringing parties in the supply chain together?
You are indeed correct that the EFTI states really briefly that the member states can establish central access point in order to better costs for the system and better accessibility. And we, at least in Estonia, as we have tested twice now, the system with a central layer, we feel that this is, at least for us and for our region, we hope, the only way to go forward. So we are planning to establish national access point or common access point. Good child has many names. This is what we are analyzing now, because we didn't want to just decide where it should be. We wanted to make a good decision. So at the moment we are in the middle of analysis where we are seeking solution, whether it be where it should be. Should it be privately owned, or should it be publicly owned, or some kind of in between? And we hope to get the answer in March already.
All right. Leah, now we've heard about pilot projects today. Now, what is the input for EFTI implementation regulations from those pilots?
As I mentioned in my presentation, we are listening to the outcomes of this project, mostly within the framework of the discussions that we're having with the DTLF experts in the subgroup 1 of the DTLF, where this will then the discussions there will turn into recommendations towards the Commission and the member states when adopting the implementation specifications for the FT platforms, but also for the systems for the authorities. So it's actually good to hear that the Baltic project is looking into having results in March, quite clear ones, so that we could take them into account in defining the specifications.
And these different projects, they can be integrated together?
Yes, we hope so. It is of course, you know, there are projects, there are pilots that are trying to test different approaches, and some might work well, some a bit less. So there are also lessons learned, perhaps, to learn from there. So they but try to test more or less the same thing, maybe from a different angle. But what I can see is that there is emerging a common approach trying to solve the issue of how the authorities can access the data that is on the FT platforms. That is, how can they find it? Because we can envisage and we expect that there will be hundreds of FT platforms all over the EU holding data from different economic operators, both within the EU and possibly also from outside the EU. So it's no national platform, so to say, you know, that will connect. So how will inspection officer in Estonia find the data that is on the goods being transported on a truck that perhaps has been registered in Romania, and now it's bringing something from Germany to Ukraine. And this data is kept on an FT platform that perhaps, you know, it's actually provided by an IT service provider in Bulgaria. So that's not so straightforward. But it seems that the solution that different projects are trying to come up with are converging. So which is actually, in a sense, perhaps reassuring to us that that's okay. That's if we go towards that, maybe that would probably the best way to go. But we're still in the phase of analyzing the different solutions. So we need to see if there are any other alternatives before obviously we will make a choice. But any choice will be certainly informed and will try to be based on very rigorous criteria. Some of them are already being developed by the experts in the DTLF, including with the help of Ulrika, because they're trying to come up with very good and very clear and well documented recommendations when it comes to decisions to be taken on the architecture for the FT information exchange environment.
Right, Heiti. Now, these changes that we're talking about, I mean, they influence the whole logistics sector, right? So, Waybiller is an EFTI service provider. Could you share your experience? What have the main challenges been, and also like the motivation for the logistics companies in this transition to digital logistics? Is the market ready? I mean, do you see excitement? Do you see worry? Sad, scared faces? What do you see?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, we have to understand that private sector, they are very different type of companies. First of all, carriers who are their own interest. Secondly, they are like economic operators or service providers like Waybiller. And there are also companies who are ordering those services, so they are living based on that. And all those companies have different interest, different readiness. I would say that economic operators or service providers are very excited because
excitement, like in a good way or in a way that
I would say in very,
you're shaking from excitement?
No. I would say in a very good way. And why I'm thinking so is when we are, well, we see that we have a huge problem. We have whole logistics sector, which today is mainly based on paper. So there are huge potential to develop services. But we need rules. And this is where the FTI regulation also came in. And also we see that it's important because we can basically develop anything because technology is there, is ready, we can use it. But it's not the only technology. There are many different ways how to solve those problems, how to combine different systems. But still, we need standards, we need rules, and without this kind of regulations, it's very hard to put together different technologies because each development company thinking at the moment that they are number one, they are making the best product, it's obviously. But if those best companies are too many, we are still finding in situation where the data is not compatible with other companies, and each company have their own data, but it stays there. So we have to build this kind of digital highway.
Eva, I wanted to comment.
Yes, I wanted. I'm really glad to hear the excitement in Heiti's words, and I assure that this is true. But also, many companies are a bit afraid because they are afraid that who might see their data, and that's why I was very happy that Leah pointed out before that one issue that EFTI is tackling now is also to make rules who can see what data, because I feel that we need to assure the companies that their data is secure and safe, and they are not. They don't have to be afraid, because at the moment, of course, if you hand out the paper, everybody can see everything. So in the future, you can only see what you're supposed to see. So in my opinion, it will make things much safer, but we need to communicate this really, really well.
Ulrika, speaking about the ECMR prototype, were there any surprises? What are the learning points?
The learning points definitely are how to better structure the takeaways. Like we have done a lot of work. We have engaged all the stakeholders around. We have put in practice, more or less, the principle that we are trying to evolve and reflect in the European Commission and the DTLF as well, that data should stay at source. So we should keep all the ECMRs or EFTI data sets, whatnot, at the ECMR service providers or EFTI service providers at national level in different companies, and then have an index which just takes the information of that document being available. And then these indexes together can pass a query. And then only when the query is made, then these documents or the contents can be shown. And what we have faced the biggest is that we've achieved a lot, but we have to convert the results into explaining, or we have to explain it better to our European other partners, that what we're talking about is exactly the same thing that they are talking about. But they have evolved it with different terms, they have evolved it with different keywords, maybe with different standards. So we're
translation issues are still prevalent.
Result translation and dissemination issues, perhaps, which we try to overcome with now that we've learned of the keywords and we have actually aligned them more better, quite like we are aligning the standards and the data fields. We are also aligning the semantics of how we talk about these solutions, that we are actually not competing. And there was this question before to Leah, that would those prototypes or developments be competing, or would they be compatible to each other? Then I see that they actually have a lot to learn from each other, especially that there are so many similarities, and you don't necessarily have to put them on who's better, whose solution we take, but more like up to 2023, we could just learn from each of them and pick up the best practices and common choices from each of them.
So Eva, what are the next logical steps in or plans in the regional cooperation? How do you get those data fields aligned and get stuff moving, which is the whole idea of it, I guess?
Yes, as I mentioned, we are having high hopes with this national access point analysis. But it is just at the moment for Estonia, because after that we want to decide where we should have it. But regarding cooperation, I'm really happy that we have so good neighbors, because as Egidius said before, we have another project coming up already next year, where we are looking more deeply into the legislation and all the data fields. And then we have in Finland, we have Gas Nordic, this group of clever people that we are cooperating with. So we see that we need to continue this work, because only if we have a common approach in this region, at least in this region, the system will work well. Because otherwise, I couldn't imagine when we have hundreds and hundreds of EFTI platforms, poor customs, who need to have, I don't know how many tablets to be able to access all this data. So I'm really, really happy about this cooperation that we have now, and that will continue.
Leah, I mean, how do we solve this variety? How do you save the poor customs person from having 10 tablets in two hands? It's a rather difficult task.
Well, as a matter of fact, they should not need to have 10 tablets, because the data should come in a single format and should be collected. I mean, now depending on if we talk transports with different more consignments, right? So a truck, for example, that has different packages that come from consigners and go to different companies. So then they would not need to have like today you have one for these consignments, you would have one tablet holding the data for each of them as well. Rather, they can all be kept in one single can even be kept on different FT platforms, and the same thing way to describe the consignor, the consignee, or the goods, so that the inspection officer will be able to read it all on its own single tablet, even if they come from different sources and they concern different consignments, transports. So
this is how the future.
Certainly something that.
This is how the future of logistics and transport will look like.
Will actually look like not even that the officer who is checking.
Machines are
stopping. That might be as well, that the machines would be reading the truck numbers. But even now, the truck wouldn't need to be stopped. That is what we are proving with the prototype that we have developed, and the concept, and then the prototypes. Not the technical solution is that important. The concept itself is that you don't need to stop the truck. All these documents that the trucks have accompanying or the data can be checked from the computers of the officers in office, not in the snow, in the dark, with the dog barking in the back, with low internet connection, with a tablet. While also the truck, even if the truck is stopped for half an hour, it can break its schedule, and it might not even reach the destination because the hours are over that the driver can have, and then it disrupts all the exceeding supply chain. So, on the 24th of December, someone is driving home and not reaching the destination, and should actually be delivering goods, or putting the truck somewhere. So it will be changing. We will not be having the same checking procedures even too often. When the truck then needs to be checked and stopped, then this will remain, but not as often as it is now. Not as inconvenient.
How far are we from this dream? And actually, what are what's stopping us from having it now, or let's say tomorrow?
Yeah, as I mentioned, technology is already there, but why we are not using it? It's the good question. And I see we have to concentrate. We have to see the biggest thing here as well, because quite oftenly, let's look to the drivers, because actually goods are moving with trucks, only with drivers. It means that
well, today, but maybe not tomorrow.
Yeah, but let's take it as it is today, and drivers usually are in the middle-aged guys who doesn't know anything about the digitalization.
It's the middle-aged guy who's again to blame.
Yeah, because their work is to drive. They don't have time actually to play in that time with mobile phones, and quite oftenly those guys, they don't have so much experience like young guys have today, and any kind of digital solutions, they will fight this, and it's like they are not so much used to do it in that way. And on the other hand, also police, customs, every officials demanding papers today. They're stopping the cars, demanding papers, so they have just in case bunch of paper. And now they don't actually need those bunch of papers. They need smartphone or tablet, and that's it. It's very big change for their life.
So the human aspect, like embracing change, it's a bigger challenge than all the rest of the troubles that we've been going through today.
Yes, and I bring one more important point here. Let's imagine that for the state authorities, all the data is will be delivered through the one national access point or to the one channel. Then if we have hundreds or thousands of different electronic document services or operators here, what the drivers must do when they are choosing different companies because they are doing it, should they have tens of mobile phones or tens of tablets or tens of apps in their mobile phone, it will be issue as well. So the driver's app could be also one.
Who's developing that?
Good question. We are ready to do that.
Well, cargo is not only moving on land and by trucks with those middle-aged men wearing sweatshirts and Crocs, but I guess you could also say that multimodal transport of any kind should be in our focus. And how does EFTI correspond to the variety of that? Who wants to take that? Multimodal transport and EFTI. Leah,
I guess
everyone's
it's a
looking
question
at
for me,
you.
right?
Yeah.
Indeed. First, it's tackling it by taking into account or addressing legislation that covers not only road, but also rail and inland waterways. And I also mentioned aviation. And basically, it targets the information requirements, right? The law says in order to prove compliance with this and these rules on road, on rail, on inland waterways, you need to present this and that information. And often this information is the same also for rail, for road, or inland waterways. So there are some differences, obviously. But the information regarding the movement of the goods, like from whom to whom, what goods are being moved, are generally the same regardless of the transport mode. And by providing the standards for the electronic recording and exchange of these different pieces of information and corresponding data elements, for legislation that covers these different transport modes, then we are allowing this information to be electronically exchanged between operators that operate on the different transport modes, without needing to any further translation. I mean, they will all use the same electronic language, so to say. So that's how we are addressing multimodality, and at the same time, obviously, we're addressing it by providing the technical specifications for the FT platforms, which should be the same for each platform, regardless of the modes of transports that they are serving. So that should also ensure interoperability, because we may also envisage that there might be FT platforms that are specializing only on road or on rail. And therefore they would also should be able to exchange not only the data in the same format, but also the rest of the technical aspects that enable data to be exchanged should also be there to ensure that to happen. We call it interoperability at technical level. So that's also being addressed with the FT regulations. So I have full trust that multimodal transport operation planning will be also greatly facilitated by the implementation of the FT regulation, by facilitating this data exchange without any further interfaces or both technical or at semantic level to translate the information coming from one platform to another. That makes it also much more costly as well.
Go ahead.
Yeah, only complement what Leah said. It is the same data that they're having. They might have different standards now. It has been actually thanks to the preparation of the EFTI regulation, and now the preparation of the implementing and delegated acts that it has been intensified, this work of comparing those data fields and actually seeing that yes, indeed, here we are talking about the same thing. No, here we are talking about of another identifier or of another understanding of something, but the goods are the same. And on the top of, if we need to put the container on a truck and then transfer the same container to rail, and then eventually it will be loaded on a vessel, then it's still the same container contents data that should be transferred then and understood in the same way. And there is great work on a nice word next to the interoperability is semantics and semantic interoperability, meaning that there is a lot of work not technically done, but just people talk to each other what they mean when they say weight, for example, or pallet, or destination or carrier. It seems simple. Of course, everyone understands.
Simple words. How are they difficult to understand?
And then there are dictionaries created, and then you can only create the data codes that the standards can speak to each other. But we have started to speak to each other, these multimodal contextuals.
That the biggest issues in to understand simple words is we can talk about receiver or sender or origin of goods or destination of goods. It might be translated a completely different way. It's so simple things, but in standards there are different things.
And we're talking about goods moving inside the EU, but what happens if we go to third countries? I mean, how does EFTI address the movement of goods, let's say, between the EU and Russia, or African countries where we get our delicious fruits from? So how does it solve that, Leah?
Well, I mentioned also during my presentation, it doesn't solve it fully. So FT regulation covers that part of the transport that takes place on the territory of the Union. However, the data can be also introduced by, the operators that are perhaps located outside of the Union, if they do it on an FT platform that is certified to be compliant with the FT regulation. So in that sense, we are covering also transports, what I mentioned, that come from outside the Union, or transports that go from the Union outside. So for the part that is taking part on the territory of the Union. But we're also, when now defining exactly this, the definitions, how to represent electronically the data, we're trying to take into account also the requirements that are set, for example, for the EU customs, because the operators, they need to submit information as well, also on the transport, the goods, the means of transport as well, origin and destination. So these are information that is also mostly be kept on FT platform, and therefore, if it is in the same the format that we are establishing for the FT platform would be aligned with those required by the EU customs systems, then the operators could have this data only once on an FT platform, and then also send it to the customs authorities, and also allow the customs authorities, if they require, to further check additional information that might be also stored on an FT platform. So that's how much we can do. Definitely, FT regulation doesn't cover the part of the transport that takes place outside of the Union. But what, again, maybe it's also important to say, we're trying to facilitate is that the standards that we're using are not only aligned with customs, but also with international data standards, and in particular the UN FACT multimodal transport reference data model, which many other countries outside the EU may also choose to use for their own, for the systems that they would be setting up or requiring to be set up in their countries. So that's the information then that is stored electronically and used to prove compliance and communicate to authorities in the countries outside the EU. Then it can be easily reused also to be then provided in the FT platforms and also for the customs. So that's how we're trying to solve that indirectly by ensuring interoperability at data level.
The way I have seen it, and I've got this question as well, like what about China? What about US? What about Brazil? What about neighborhood countries, Russia? What about Turkey? What about countries that have ECMR but are not EU countries? What about Switzerland? then I have always told that we saw with the FTI and with our solutions, our regions, data and information interoperability, create data visibility, create the rules, create an understanding, which then can be learned from. And whoever has maybe a similar high-end level then, or they can learn, those systems can then be made to speak it to each other. And we might even reach in maybe in 15 or 20 years' time, situation where majority of international trade actually will be paperless, just thanks to all the regional systems as well speaking to each other. And I think European Union providing a common understanding and making a digitalization step is essential. And we're contributing. And maybe I got this question, and we had this question in 2015 and 16, like EFTI regulation, paperless. It was in the DTLF or in the commission meeting that companies asked, what do you want us to imagine that kind of like by 2030 everything would be digitally possible? And then we had to respond, what if? Let's think that what if, how this could be done. And as soon as you open the opportunity to think about the options, they start emerging.
So the mindset has changed, Eva?
I hope so. But I must add that the EFTI at the beginning at least puts the obligation to countries for authorities to accept electronic documents, but not to the operators. So if the guy from Russia comes with a paper, we still need to accept it. So it is not compulsory for them. But we see that when we create opportunity and then they start to see the benefits, then slowly and steadily they will change. We hope so.
Heiti, now we've covered the new regulations and what digitalization has created, these new opportunities, but what if you would just like fantasize a bit, like what are the new opportunities for EFTI service providers to really enlarge the available services and their accessibility?
When I'm talking from like one service provider perspective, definitely we would like to grow. We would like to grow to the other countries, create better services, which is actually issue at the moment, because I feel that there is quite strong competition also domestically. So to go to another country as a service provider from neighbor countries must be difficult, because there are also legal issues. But in other hand, also what I see that it's not only ECMR which concerns the logistics data. There are tens or even more different sources, what kind of data we can combine and which is needed actually. Because when we are also talking about those authorities who need to make some kind of checking activities, they have very different approaches to get this information. Police checking, is the truck okay, technical inspection, these kind of things, who's the driver, from where do they have all permissions. Customs interested more about the goods and these kind of things. Economic environment, different authorities needs different data, and all the data is not covered by ECMR. So definitely we have to see this picture more wide and combine also different sources. This is the future, I think.
This is the future. Anyone else wants to comment the future? Time's running up fast though. Any last final remarks, Eva?
Yes, I can maybe, when I say that the regulation, the first is not on operators, then I'm happy to say that we are starting to nudge also the companies to be more digitalized, and we have decided to give some recovery and resilience funds in order to create, first of all, EFTI platforms. And when that is done, then to give more funds to companies to be connected to these platforms, which is seems simple, but it's as we don't have delegated acts yet. We are very much hoping for Elia's help and the GTLF to figure out parallelly with the work of the Commission how we can do it. But we are very confident that this money will be well spent, and we will be very much digitalized in 5 years at least.
Yes, we are now 2021. We're waiting for the delegated acts, and few are waiting, few are working on this. And 2023, 4, we might have the rules, but 4 and 5, all the systems have to be ready. During the time, we're testing and prototyping, we're learning, and then at the same time, we already, announce calls for companies to apply for funding in Estonia to develop or improve their ECMR platforms. And then, so we're testing, developing, evolving, and making rules, and almost doing it all at the same time, because the time frame is very short. But nevertheless, like you say, the mindset that changed, and then the mindset has changed into let's solve this. Let's have it. That's more of that we can do it. and even the hesitant partners that perhaps we had last year when we had the first round of the index testing, it was like, yeah, I'll just provide you a few of the CMRs, and then you can get done with the project, and done it is. And now it was this year, yeah, but let it be the last year that you're playing. Let's next year have a proper system. But everyone has come along and said, like, yes, of course, we'll provide you. Is our file good? Can we send you the PDF still? I'm like, maybe we'll figure out a way how to convert them. But we've onboarded, and there is a huge interest now, and also from the companies that see that they don't actually know how this will be solved yet, but they see that eventually it will turn up positive for them, especially the economic operators and the industries that are very often overlooked, because the production industry and they are also the winner in this, not just logistics.
Dear audience, this wraps the last panel discussion of the conference, and the panelists certainly deserve an applause.
Also, for example.
Thank you very much, guys.